Let me know, Akash, if you're able to see the screen.
Yeah, that's visible.
Okay, cool. And my voice is audible, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Try speak little bit louder. That will be good for others.
So, hi guys, welcome to our last session of JavaScript presented by SFTC Panther and Nikhil Karkra. So, let's see what we're gonna learn today. So, today's session is little bit unique because it's not from the point of exam exactly. There are few concepts that gonna come in your exam, but rest all concepts are very helpful or handy from your actual coding point of view that we're gonna learn today. And today's agenda, you can see, first we'll see what is number to locally string. Then after that, we'll see what is pad stat and pad end. Actually, we're gonna see all the use cases of these concepts. Okay. Then what is chaining operator, what is nullish operator, and different types of console method. Then we'll see string substitution in console. So console methods and string substitution in console is very important from the exam point of view as well. Then we'll see debugger, debugging in browser, and randomly if some any other tricks comes in my mind, I'll include that as well. And in the last, we'll go with the quiz. Okay, so let's move on to our first topic, that is number to local string. So number to local string. This method converts a number into a string using a local language format, and the default language depend on the local setup on your computer. So let's go and see, because most of the people think, okay, anyhow, we know how to convert a number into string, but we'll see the benefit of this method in real use case. Okay. So I'll go to my browser. I have my VS Code as well, but I'll write in the console for the first few topics. So I have a number variable called total number, and number is a decimal number. So 123456789. And if I call a to locally string on this, it automatically format my number in the comma separated form. And why it's taking three digit after the comma? Because I'm in an Australian region and it's taking that as my locally. If I want to convert the same number in the Indian region, for that I just need to pass my locally. So locally is like for each and every country we have different symbols. So for India, I have EN. EN is stand for English and IN for India. And now if I hit enter, it converts the number into the Indian format. And in Indian format, we have like hundreds, thousand, and lakhs. So that's why we have two commas. And in Australian region, we have like hundred, thousands, and millions, trillions like that. That's why I have only three, one comma after three. So this is the basic one. Okay, now we'll go and see what else we can do with this method. So in real time, we need to convert a number into a comma separated as well as with the dollar sign or the currency sign. So this method gives us the freedom to achieve that as well. So if I want to convert a number into rupee, that is an Indian format, it takes the second parameter as options, and it has a property called style. Style says what style you want. I want a currency format, and then it takes currency, which currency we want, INR. And now if I hit enter, it automatically append the raw symbol in front of our rupees. So it's a pretty good trick actually, because if you've seen, many coder will copy this symbol and then concatenate with the number, and number converts into the comma separation. So this is pretty handy. And likewise, you can do it for the British English as well. Like for British English, we have a symbol GB, and we can say euro. And if I hit enter, it gives me a amount in the euro format. So this is the another use case of to locally string. We can see another use case. There are many, actually, there are many properties you can explore yourself. I'll go with another one in which we have to convert a number into a percentage. There also it's very handy. Instead of calculating division or multiplication by 100, you just call to locally string. I want it to be in British English format, and it takes the property style. Style, I'll say I need percent. So now it converts that particular number into percentage. So to whenever you use a percentage, always remember your number should be in the range of 0 to 1. Then only it converts. Otherwise, if I go and change the number to 100, it converts and gives us 10,000. So ideally, if you're converting a number to a percentage, always make sure your number is in the format of 0 to 1 range. So this is another way you can automatically append the percentage symbol and calculate the percentage without creating your util function and other stuff. So let's go back to our slide and see the second trick that we have. Then the second method is called pad start and pad end, and it was very recently introduced. This method pads the current string with another string multiple times if needed until the resulting string reach the given length. And pad end is just opposite of it. So we'll go and see what it means. I'll clear my console. Suppose I have a number. So pad stat and pad string always work with the string. So I'll take a number in the string format right now, and I'll say num dot pad start, and I want the length of my whole padding should be 10, and the second parameter is the pad string. So what pad string will do is what you want to append. So if I say append 0 in front of all, so I'll repeat it again. So first parameter here is pad length. Pad length will count what's the actual count of the number that is coming or the string that is coming. And if that length is less than the actual length given here, then it will pad the remaining length with the substitute that we are passing here. So it's a pad string that we are passing. And in real use case, we heavily use this method in terms of when we want to hide something from your Visa card or any banking application. So let's see a real-time example of this as well. I have a big number similar to your credit card number or any number, and I want the user to see only the last 4 digits that usually in most of the website we show. So to do that, I can use a slice method. And slice method, what it gonna do is it just remove the first 4, the last 4, because we are giving the minus here. So it takes the last 4 digits, then it append in the start all the stars, and we are giving the num dot length here. So it takes the total length as the count, and in the remaining length, it will put the star here. So if I hit enter, so the length is exactly similar to our number length. We are showing only the 4 digits, that is by -4 using the slice method we already seen our previous videos, and it taking the length, total length, and replacing the rest of the remaining length with the star. So this is a real use case of the pad start. Instead of doing many line of coding like appending star again and again and removing the data and appending the data again. So this is pretty handy and shortcut way to generate this sort of approach. Similarly, you can do with the pad end as well. And if I have a string called Salesforce developers, and I'll say string 1 dot pad end, so it will do it in the end. And I'll say I have a total length of 25, and to the remaining length, you just append dot. So in the blogging, whenever you want something to append or donate, show as a dot, 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 like continuation operators, so you can use this approach to achieve that as well. So this is what pad start and pad end. It's pretty simple, but it's very helpful because without using pad end and pad start to achieve this scenario, it takes around 5 to 10 line of code. So let's move on to our next topic, that is optional chaining operator. So optional chaining operator allow you to access the value of a property located deep within a chain of objects without explicitly checking if each reference in the chain is null or undefined. Let's go and see what it means. And it's very recently introduced, I guess, in January 2020 only this operator got launched. And I'm not sure whether Salesforce supports this or not. So from the JavaScript point of view, we'll see how it works. So, and this is very helpful actually in real-time use case. Suppose you are getting some object from the server or from your Apex. Okay, and many time it happens, we don't know in the accounts object, do we have the city field available or not? So it usually comes like within the object, we have the address property, and within the address, we have a nested city property, and city property is coming as null. And to set some data, what I'll go with the traditional way, how we were achieving the use case earlier. So we were writing the code like this. So I want to fetch the region, or region, you can say city as well. So what we were doing earlier is we'll say, okay, within the object and operator, object dot address is available, and operator object dot city dot object dot address dot city. If all these conditions satisfied, then map my object dot address dot city to region variable. Otherwise, my region variable should be Melbourne, and then we were printing the region. So this was like pretty tedious work. Then we come up with a better approach in recent years. We said instead of using if else, because if you are using a code static analyzer like SonarQube and all, and you are getting many times like your if else should not be too many in a particular function, or it should not be nested. Then we come up with another approach called ternary operator. So in ternary operator, we simplify our if else with this approach, in which I'll just zoom it. In this approach, we were checking whether the object is there, object.address is there, object.address.city is there. If all these conditions satisfy, use that city, otherwise take the default value as a Melbourne. So if I hit enter and print region, it gives me the Melbourne. But now JavaScript said, why to do this too much operator concatenation or like execution? So they come up with a simplified approach called optional chaining. So what it says first go to your object, then use question mark and dot. It is checking whether it's there or not. Then say address, then put the question mark and dot, then you put your city, and then you can use double question mark. This double question mark, I'll come back to you. And if these all condition true, then print your Melbourne. And now if I print, and now you can see that with respect to previous code, this was the recent one, and after that this one. It's so simple to achieve that scenario and without breaking your code. Because many times we get an error when we try to fetch the value city dot value something, it says cannot read property because property doesn't exist. To save this sort of error, this optional chaining is very helpful. And about this operator, we'll come to the next slide. That is called nullish coalescing operator. We called it in short nullish operator, and it's represented by double question mark. Is a logical operator that accepts two operands and return the right hand operand if the left one is null or undefined. Let's go and see the actual use case. This is also one of the use case, but we'll show why it's preferable over OR operator. Okay. So I have something, I create a variable something, and we already know if you create a variable without initializing anything, it's by default undefined. And now I want some name. In a way, if something has some value, assign that value to the name. Otherwise, give that value. This is how we were achieving earlier with the OR operator. So OR operator check whether the first value is the truthy value or not. I repeat, OR operator check whether the first operand is a truthy value or not. Truthy are like true or a particular string and all. So if I hit enter and if I print name, it prints the name Nikhil. Till here it was fine. The same thing our nullish operator does. So if I say if something is available, assign Nikhil 1 to the variable name. This is also working fine. So what was the use of this operator? Because we were achieving everything with the OR operator. So there was a catch in programming. So now I'll go to the use case. So suppose I have is valid number equal to 0. 0 is a valid number in many use case when you are working on some calculation or a direction in programming. That time 0 is very helpful number. So I initialize a variable is valid with the 0. Now we'll achieve the same thing with the both operator. Okay, so I'll say is valid num. I'll say where num equal to, if is valid num is available, then use that num, otherwise assign 100. And now if I hit enter and print num, it's printing 100. But for me, 0 is a valid number. I want 0 to be assigned to the number. It's happening because I already said OR operator check whether this value is truthy or not, and 0 is by default a falsy number. So here it false, and in programming it breaks our logic and introduce some syntax or some logical errors. To save this problem, they come up with a nullish operator, and that takes the defined value, actually not the truthy value. If a defined value is available in the variable, it takes that value, and this is how it works. So to solve this issue with the mathematical calculation, especially, we introduce this nullish operator. So it's achieve everything that OR operator does apart from these mathematical calculation errors. Okay, let's go to our slide and move on to the another topic, that is console methods. From exam point of view, pretty important, like 2 to 3 questions will be there from the console. So in web browser, console is a tool that helps us to log information associated with a web page, like error, warning, network requests, etc. And in JavaScript, the console is an object which provides access to the browser debugging console, and the console object provides us several different methods. So whoever are from the programming background and whoever does the JavaScript at least, so they already know how console works, but let's go and see actually how console works. Okay, so those who don't know about debugging, it's from debugging start for JavaScript from console only. And this is our inspect element. So to open that, we usually do the right click and click inspect. The third tab is a console. Order can be anything, you can change the order, that doesn't matter. So console is very helpful when you want to give some meaningful information to the user and while debugging as well. So first method that is the most commonly used one is log method. So it just log your information. JS. So it just log an information in our console. So while debugging and you want to see what data is coming, you just put that object here, like x equal to Nikhil, some data is coming in your program. you want to log that, so you can log easily. This is the one approach of debugging using the console. Just print it and see what it is coming. Then there is another method of logs. Like there are different use cases of logs that hardly any developer use, but it's very handy. So next is the info method. So if we want to give some information to the user, we usually go with the console.info. And what kind of information we usually gives? Like LWC latest version is available. This is an info that we want to give to the user when our engine runs, when we use some library. So it print that in the info way, and you can change the level whether you want to see that particular console or not. So if I uncheck the info, you can't see the info message here. So if I checked it, you can see the info message. Similarly, I can select warning, and that is our next method, that is warning. So warning method is very helpful when you are particularly want to warn regarding something, and in most of the library nowadays you will see the warning message when you are not adhere to the standards of accessibility. And this is one of the real-time example that I'm going to show you. If you have used any advanced framework like React and Vue.js, you usually see this method image element must have the alt prop, either with a meaningful text or an empty string for decorative image. So this is a warning message we usually get when we are not defining the alt property in our image tag, because alt property is very much important from the accessibility point of view. And for warn method, we use warn, and you can see it come with the warning icon, and its color is bit different. Earlier, before this release of Chrome, info message used to come in the blue color. Now it's not coming, and you can see that it's giving us the stack trace where it's coming. So this is the warn method. Then the another method is error method. And error method we already know, like whenever we use the catch in the try catch block. I have seen many people use the console.log only, but the right approach to log an error is the console.error. We should not use log for the error property because it doesn't make sense here, because while seeing the console you can't figure out whether it's an error or not. But as soon as if you log it as an error, you can see something has break. The danger color, red color, is on your console, and it gives you the stack trace as well where it's happening. Okay, so this is another method, and most commonly used methods are console log and the error from debugging point of view. Warning is more of giving some particular warning, and info very rarely we use. So next one is these four messages. We already seen that, but we have seen only the first argument of these messages. So we were printing only the message to the log, warning to the warn message, error message to error, but there is some another property along in this method, that is argument, and that is very important from the exam point of view. So just remember, only four methods support the string substitution in the console. And let's see what is string substitution here. For string substitution, like console.log, say hello, how, your second parameter should be data. And now if you see, I'm passing this data dynamically to my string substitution. So string substitution values are already here, like %2, %d, %s. So I'm printing like, hello Nikhil, how are you? Similarly, you can say how my age is. You can say %d for the substitution of number. And I can pass the second 10, a number. So now you can see my age is 10. Just remember the order starts from left to right. So if you are substituting something, it should read from left to right. So if first substitution is string, so the first argument should be string. Likewise, you can add an objects as well using percentage O, and you can pass some object like name, hello, anything. And now you can see, hello Nikhil, how are you? My age is an object. An object you can expand as well. So these are the different way, and these all will work with all these four methods. Just remember these four method only supports string substitution. One is log, another one is error, info, and one. That is the basic method that we have seen. So these are the string substitution. You can support the floating value as well using the %f. Now let's go to the my favorite one, that is console.tab table, console.table, sorry, and it takes two parameter table data in the table column, and it print the data in the tabular format. So let's go and see this. I'll clear this. I have an object where obj equal to, I have array of objects, and it can be many. Okay. Now if I hit enter, I miss some bracket, that is extra bracket. Now my object is having two, my array has two objects, and now readability is not that clear. Okay, so to achieve that, you can print simply console dot table, convert my array of object into the table, and just pass that object. And it's very handy from debugging point of view. It's give you the clear difference. Okay, what is name, what are the languages, what are the index value for that particular object. And there may be a time like you may have 300 or 400 objects, 400 properties in an object. So for that, they have given another property. Just pass what all property you want to fetch for the table. So suppose if I just print console.table and the object, it prints all the objects in the tabular format, but my object has many properties, then you can define the properties that you want from the debugging point of view, or you want to see the property, just pass that properties in string format, it just print those properties. So I said, okay, from the object obj, give me the only the name properties in the table format. So it is pretty clear way of seeing the data and very handy. Let's move on to the next one. That is, next one is console.time and console.time end. This is very helpful if you are very keen about the performances and you want to understand like how much time my API is actually taking. Let's go and see how actually it works. We'll go back to our console. Okay, I'll create one function called API. In this, we just write some code for our API. So we already know fetch is the default standard nowadays for fetching the API. I'm saying, okay, use a fetch API, call this API, it's a URL. And if I'm not defining a method, by default, it's a get method. It gives us the data in the byte stream. We convert that byte stream into the JSON format, and then it returns ideally promise. That's why we are using the .then method. Once we convert the JSON, we'll say console.json. Okay, so this is the basic one. Now we want to call this, we already know, just call it using the name and the calling bracket. But I want to see how much time actually this fetch API has taken, or this service call has taken. To achieve that, we have to use console.time and we'll pass the label. Label is the parameter used to differentiate if you are using many console for times. But if you are not using, that is also fine, but I'll give a name, timer. and I'll say, okay, whenever this function calls, start the timer, and whenever the function ends, stop the timer. So here I'll print console dot end time, time end actually. We'll say the same label name just to make sure this is the my start time and this is the end time. This time, this label help us to differentiate, okay, when the actual timer start and when the actual timer ends. Now if I hit enter, now you can see that first thing I'm using the table, I got the JSON in the tabular form, and now you can see it gives me the actual time this service call has taken. So it's 907 millisecond it has taken, not even the 1 second. So it's pretty good. And this is how we actually calculate the performances of the APIs. And this method is very helpful to calculate the times. Let's go to the another one and see what it gives us. That is the console.group and console.groupend. And this also have some use case, but not that popular, but we'll see this as well. So we'll clear this. And I create an array of object, a big array of object. So I print X, now it has 7 objects. And now if I want to loop something, I put a for each loop on X array. We already know the syntax now. We'll take the each item. I'll use the arrow function because it's a callback. And now if I console these properties, basic console, and I'm using a string interpolation. So within the for each loop, I am printing the name, language, and 3 times with a different syntax, different strings. So first we'll print the name is language developer. So it's like Nikhil is JavaScript developer. Nikhil is 23-year-old, and Nikhil is the developer name. So if I hit enter, now you see it's very tough for us to read when something we are logging within the loop. And I especially want to go each 3 times. Okay, these are the first, these are the second, these are the third. I want a way by which my readability within the loop should be very good. To solve this issue, we have group console.group. So what we're gonna do here is we'll say, okay, use the group method. Group also take the label. So loop taking the dynamic, we'll say, okay, group by name. So all console should be grouped by name, and their grouping should end once the last console comes. So we'll say group end. Now if I hit enter, now you can see the readability is pretty clear. It's all are grouped. And now you can see, okay, Nikhil has these 3 console, Smith has these 3 console, Warner has these 3 console. So to increase the readability within the loop for the console, you can use this approach. And this is one of the real-time use case I have used. Now let's go to our next topic, that is debugger. And debugger statement invokes an available debugging functionalities such as setting a breakpoint. If no debugging functionality available, this statement has no effect. Okay, let's go to our playground, and this time we're gonna use our VS Code especially. I clean this, and I already have an index.html. In that I have just created a button. That button you can see here, it's click me. Apart from that, it's a static text. I'm loading the app.js. I'll go to my app.js and write something. First, I'll attach an event handler to my button. We'll use the query selector, and we'll say fetch the button using btn id. Once element is available, add the event listener. Listener name is click. And it should call the callback, that is button handler. This will be the function. And now if I create a function, this function gets called and button will always send us an event. I'll print some values on click of the button, that is start. I'll print the event and I'll print the console end. I'll remove the warning. Okay, so now this is the basic functionality on click of button. I'm attaching an event handler click, and on click it should print these three values: start, the event, and the end. If I click now, you can see it start, the event, the end. In real time, if we want to stop our execution at a particular point and we don't know how it's going to happen, JavaScript gives us a keyword called debugger. Just add this debugger and save your code, and once you hit the click me, it immediately stop the execution at line number 7 in the browser. So if I hit, now you see it immediately take the control, stop the execution wherever he finds the debugger keyword. And now you can see, you can hover over the event, you can play around with the event if you want. Like event has many things, so like target, the target is from where actual button is, so it gives us the button syntax. You can pick up the node name, and that is the button. So this is the another way of debugging. And this debugging approach is helpful when you are uncertain, like where I want, when this execution reach to this point, just put the debugger and you play around with your app, and suddenly when this function gets called, it stops it. But ideally I never use this approach, but this is another approach from the exam guide of point of view. Now let's go and see the other approaches, and this time I guess we don't have slide after this. Debugging in browser with breakpoints. So to play around with this, before that I'll remove the debugger here and I'll pass the debugger. I'll open a salesforce.com and we'll play everything here now, how debugging works. Okay, so this is our salesforce.com. I'll go to inspect. In inspect, first tab is element. So now we are learning how actually debugging happen. Okay, so first tab is element. Element is nothing, it's a DOM. DOM is a document object model. Each tag we called it as a node. Like div is a node, header is a node, a is a node, and they have further a child elements. And then we have a network tab. Network tab shows us what all services we have hit it. So if I refresh the page, you can see all the services, including the resources, what image it is loading, what's the file it's loading and all. And here there are filter criteria. You just want to see what all the service it hit it. So you can see the services here. I'll just increase the size now and I'll reduce this. So this shows all the services. And if you want what all JS file it has loaded, you can see all the polyfills and the vendor files, all the CSS it is using. They are using accessibility, a particular CSS for accessibility. You can see that. Then there is image file. You can see that what all images it's loading. So you can copy from here if you want. Then media, font, and so many things. Then the third tab is the console. We already seen that. Then we have the source tab. Source tab gives us the whole code that this page, particular page is loading. So here on the left side, you can see all the sources they are using, including the plugins, including the font library. So they are using the Google fonts, Lato 300, 400, 700 font fits. They are using a geolocation on trust, some cookies and all. So you can see everything in the source. We'll come back to source. Source is very important from debugging point of view. This is all about performance. So you can start the performance and check the performance of the how much time it takes to paint our DOM, how much time it taking to load the JS, how much time it taking to load the our CSS. Then we can take the heap snapshot for our instances. Then we have applications. This application tabs gives us to check what is in the local storage. So you can see they are storing some of our data, like when we logged in, the timestamp and other stuff. Then we have session storage. You can see the session storage, cookies, everything under the application. Then security gives us an overview, like how many services they are using and whether those services are actually secure, like whether they are using the HTTP services or not. Then Lighthouse, I guess it's extra plugin that is in my browser. It's very beautiful plugin given by Google to check the performance of your website. We'll come back to this again. Okay. Now we'll go first to our console, and console gives us the freedom to fetch the elements. So if I go and see, okay, there is an ID called main. I'll go in the traditional way of fetching the data, document.get element by ID. They said just pass the ID name and hit it. You can see I'm able to fetch that particular element or the node. Then there was another way we can go to our element and see, okay, which class I want to fetch. I want the class ghost to be fetched. So in traditional way, we were using document.get elements. Here it's elements because class can be many. So get elements by class name, pass the class name. It returns all the elements that are using this particular class ghost. So there are 4 elements of those who are using the ghost class. Then there is another approach in traditional way. We are talking like I want the header to be fetched by the tag name. So in the traditional way, we were using document.get elements by tag name. You can pass the tag name and it fetches the particular tag. So these all different syntax we were using, and it's quite tough for us to remember all different names. So JavaScript introduced the query selectors. So what query selector does, it says you just call me and pass your query notation. So it's selector type, and we already know hash donates the our ID. So if I say fetch query selector, and if we are appending hash, it automatically understands behind the scene it's an ID. If I say fetch me class, so class we already know using dot notation. So I'll say ghost. It gives me the ghost. But now here is a catch. ID is only one in the DOM, so we are able to fetch the particular element. But ghost, the class is 4, we already seen, but it's returning the first element of using the query selector. And ghost is many, so we always need like an array. To achieve that, we introduce query selector all. So query selector all is helpful when you want to fetch many things, and it's most cases we need many elements. So if I say now it returns me the 4 element. And now the most important point, where the maximum people gets the bug in the real-time production, they just run the loop in LWC. I have seen many codes like people just run the loop directly on the document.query selector result, and that's a very bad practice because this result is not an array, and you can see it's a node list. That is a array like structure, but it's not an array. And I'll prove that quickly. If I run a map, we already know the map function runs on the array. A map is an array method. So if I run and print log item and hit, it's a query selector all map is not a function, but we already know map is a function that runs on an array. And some browsers support this, but it's not an ideal way to run directly a loop on the query elements. So if you have seen the document of LWC, they would have used this operator array dot from. So we are converting the actual list to an array. That is these list is array like nodes like array, but these are not exactly array. And to convert these nodes, we are using a array dot from. that converts the node list into an array, and then you can run your map function. So always prefer to use array.from while you are using this .template.query selector in LWC project. So this is one of the key point, because sometimes it works in your local, but in production it fails. And you don't know which browser the client is using, because client can use IE, Firefox, any browser, because Chrome usually supports everything. So this is on handy operator. Then we'll go and see, like in the exam, they may ask you what all thing you can do with the console. We already seen we can fetch the element, we can remove the, we haven't seen the remove element. So we'll remove some elements here. I'll go to my element tab. I hover here. I'll see there is a class called column container. I'll go and I'll say document dot query selector. Query selector all. I'll pass this class, and it returns 36 nodes. So 36 nodes are too many, like everywhere they are using this class. And if I want to remove these all tags or the all elements from our file or the page, we just say document.query selector column container, fetch all the nodes, convert all the nodes into an array, and then use the for each, and to each item just call the remove method. Now if I hit enter, now you can see that whole page is gone except the footer and the header where they were not using this class. So this is how you can remove the element as well in the debugger mode or in the console. Apart from that, you can remove the element using like right click and delete element. So if I delete, that element has gone. So that is another way of removing and deleting. Apart from that, we'll see another some cool tricks of debugger. So sometimes we don't know. Suppose I have this image, okay? I'll hover it and I want to fetch this URL. Just focus here, click once here, come back to the console, type $0. It immediately gives you the actual element where you put the focus. And with this, you can say source, you can fetch the actual URL of this image, and you can download and use anywhere if it's not copyrighted especially. So $0 is a pretty cool feature by which you can select any element. Like if I hit here and come back and print $0, it gives me the element that I selected there. Apart from that, there are some other feature, like when you're playing some calculation here in x2 plus 3 something, and I print x, some other, I forgot that one. That is more like you can store the variable temporarily as well. Apart from that, another cool trick we can check here is, so we already seen on hover we are opening the drop downs, right? But we don't know which file Salesforce is using behind the scene. So to do that, I focus on my button, I do the right click, I put the break on, attribute modification, and immediately I hover here, it immediately take my cursor or the execution to the file, which file they are using. The file name is this, and on hover they are calling this method. This is another way how we can figure out which function they are calling on hover of this list. It immediately call that. And now our next topic starts with here only. It's a source where the all files available we already seen. Now we can't read this file because it's a minified version. To unminified, we have a prettify icon below, and if you click here, it will just convert our minified version to a readable code, prettify it. And now we can see they are calling the navlink method. On click of that, they are using the for each loop. Based on that, they are setting some attributes, whether it's area expand, true or false sort of. So this is how you can put. Apart from that, instead of using that debugger keyword, you can click on a particular line and you can use the debugging there as well. So if I pass this, we can remove the breakpoint from here as well. First, I'll remove the breakpoints, or you can go back and remove from here as well. So you can see there is a icon here. It means you already set a break on. So you can remove the attribute from here. And we already set the explicit debugger here as well. I'll just remove this. I'll refresh it actually. It's hang now. Open it again. So apart from that, actually, we can learn it here itself. Okay, so I'm in the console. Now I want to put a debugger here. So you just click on the particular function, particular line. So these are the line number, and you want to stop it without using a debugger keyword. So I haven't used any debugger keyword here. And now if I click on click me, it immediately stop the execution where you put your debugging point. And you can pass the, suppose I put the debugger point only at line number 5, and if I want to pass the execution, I can pass it by clicking this icon. But if you want to put the debugger like on the next line and you want to jump to the next line, there is a step over next function call. So if I say, it will go immediately to the next line, then next line, and it will pass our execution. And this is one of the easiest way for debugging. Initially it takes time, but once you are very good in debugging, it helps a lot, because here you can check what's the local scope of the event, what's the global scope here, what all the debugger points we are using, what all the global listener, if there is any in the project. So these are pretty cool tricks that you can use in debugging. And in our application tag, we already seen there are some local storage and session storage so that you can use. I guess that's all that I have. And let's go back to our